My name is Kathy Brown. I'm one of the project managers that's supporting the new PFA functionality that's going live. So let's get started. So this talks about for Group 5 departments, the new PFA functionality will go live after the departments have come in and tested it on March 30th. And so we're going to talk to you today about what you'll need in preparation for the new PFA validation to help you be prepared when you come in for testing. So we will have the testing in the Jade Room at Fiscal. We will have staff there to assist you with this testing. The testing will be from March 2nd to March 20th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a lunch break from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. We will, in the coming slides, we will show you, we've broken up the departments. We'll show you which group you're in, if you're in week 1 or week 2. So here's a slide I was talking about. This is our current schedule for the week 1 departments, which is March 2nd to March 6th, and week 2 departments from March 9th to March 13th. If you have any concerns about where we have you scheduled, please email us at, please email CMO and let us know what your concern is, and we will respond to you with an answer. So this talks about the staff that we would like the departments to send in order to have successful testing. We'll need at least one person that runs your labor distribution, and we have the roles listed below, which would be your LD processor and LD maintainer. We'll need at least one person who processes allocations. The roles that would be needed would be the GL allocation processor and the GL approver. We'll need at least another person or the same person, depends on how your department has it assigned, who can validate the PFA. So that person would have the roles of your GL appropriation viewer, your GL operating budget reviewer, and your GL reporter and GL viewer. So we're asking, since we have a large group of departments attending this testing, we're asking that you limit bringing 4 attendees so that we have enough room for people to perform this testing. If any time you have any questions, please reach out and we will address your questions here today. So this talks about the tasks that we need the department to fill out so we know what users are coming, so we can have those users set up for the lower level test environment that you'll be using for the PFA validation. So your BUSN943G5, that will identify the participants that the department's sending, which is due on February 21st. And then BUSN943G5 will be when the calendar invites are sent to the identified participants, and that will happen on February 24th. This is an example of what the response template will look like. And it gives you an example in the first line of what we need to have provided in order to set up the user in the lower level test environment. So this slide talks about experts or SMEs who will be available to support you during the sessions. We will have SCO in the room. SCO will be in the room to assist with explaining the PFA validation tool and to address any questions regarding SCO's rules for the PFA cost allocation process. Fiscal will be in the room. We will help you update allocation configuration for the PFA validation, and we will also assist departments with the analysis of allocations and the PFA validation. The Department of Finance will also be in the room. They will answer any policy questions in relation to PFA, and they will also assist with the departments, with the analysts, with analyzing and the PFA validation. So we're asking that the departments use the following validation steps when testing the PFA validation. So one, we're going to ask that you confirm your PFA configuration is accurate. And that will be, we'll talk about it later, but that will be using budget details in comparison to what your PFA letter or plan says to make sure they match. We're asking that you bring any personal activity sheets, if you use them currently today, to key them in the system. Be aware that the last run or the last capture of data was as of October 15th from production, which is what we're using in the lower level test environment to test with. So anything that was entered after October 15th for these personal activity sheets, you'll need to bring for testing. Also, if you would like to know what period, accounting period you're using for testing, please email us at CMO, and we can provide you that information because we understand departments are experiencing labor errors, which you would have fixed already. So you can bring that information with you to know what to fix in the lower level test environment. So the next step would be to run your labor distribution process. And if you have any statistic journals that you would like to test, we would like you to bring those with you. Then we would ask you to run the allocation process. After that's completed, we'll ask you to analyze and confirm allocations and the PFA validation balances are accurate. We'll ask you to validate the PFA error report, which we'll show you later on in this presentation. We'll ask you to communicate any issues you have with us, with any of the SMEs in the room, so we can get it resolved while you're here doing testing. And it'll just make it easier to resolve the issues now versus when the functionality goes live. And then we'll ask you to sign off certifying that you've completed the PFA validation. So before leaving this session, we'll ask you to run your PFA Free Report to certify the configuration. This sounds like you would do it now in production. You won't do this now. You'll wait until you come in for testing, and then you'll have access to run that PFA Tree Report. So in order to make this testing successful, we're asking that the department bring their last PFA approved letter and recent approved PFA transaction requests. We're asking that the department bring source documents, as we talked about earlier, your statistic journals, any current year general ledger entries that are subject to a manual allocation process, and any personal activity sheets. We're asking you to bring a detailed list of appropriation items. This is the data that you can run now. You can collect this information by running your budget details report in commitment control. Please ensure you use Ledger Group CC Approach. And we'll also, to make it easier to the department, when you run the budget details and you can export it into Excel, please run it by an ACMA year because it'll just make it easier when you come in and you compare it to the PFA Tree Report. So this shows you an example, and it gives you the breadcrumbs at the top of the screen of how to access budget details. And this shows where we're using enactment year 2018. And then it, of course, shows you the little spreadsheet box where you can click on it and download the information in Excel. And you can either bring it with you electronically or print it out and bring it with you during testing. So today, departments follow a 4-step process for their PFA. So your PFA is your proposed plan by a department to allocate costs paid from one fund or appropriation to other funds or appropriations. For reference, you can see SAM section 8452. Each PFA request includes one primary appropriation and one or more special items of appropriation. The departments now run a report in Fiscal. The transactions run in Fiscal are reflected in a PFA report. Departments then validate this information on the PFA report to determine the PFA adjustments are posted through online are correct, and to make sure that your online GL manual journals, your labor distribution, and your allocation GL journals are posted. So then departments currently today use the PFA report to manually populate the paper transaction request, or TR, sent to SCO for processing. So this slide kind of goes with what is out there for the month-end close checklist. So departments would process their PFA and fiscal before closing their period. Obviously, you'll close your submodules, but you don't want to close your AM or GL. So you want to confirm all subsystem transactions are posted in a closing period. You want to close your subsystems and run your labor distribution process. Then you would run your allocation process. You're going to review your allocation results. If the allocation results look accurate, you're going to post the allocation journals. Then you're going to perform your agency and PFA reconciliation. And then, of course, the last step is you would submit your PFA transaction request to SCO for processing. So this talks about when the new PFA validation functionality goes live in March 2020. So we want to make sure during testing that your fiscal configuration matches your PFA letter or plan. So your PFA validation will enforce one and only one primary item of appropriation per PFA transaction. Debits and credits between the primary item of appropriation and corresponding special item of appropriation, which are called targets now, are balanced. PFA validation will occur in fiscal on eligible labor distribution, allocation, and manual GL journal transactions that would impact your PFA. So, and this talks about your labor transactions, your allocation steps that have been identified for a PFA, and then your GL journals with an SCO transaction type of PFA or CARE or ESAD. So this slide talks about how this new PFA validation process is going to change your business process. So approved PFA letters will be stored as PFA trees in fiscal. And there was an example shown earlier about what this PFA tree report will look like, and that you'll be able to use to compare to your budget details. So now this new process will be used for systematic validation of PFA transactions to ensure that it's in accordance with the PFA. So basically it's checking against your budget to ensure that you have the authority to PFA those transactions. So the PFA validation will systematically check online GL journals, labor distribution, and allocation GL journals to ensure that they follow the PFA. Journals will need to be split by the primary item of appropriation into multiple journals to pass the PFA validation. PFA validation will run on each individual journal that's created by the PFA allocation. Fiscal departments will continue to submit. Give me 1 second, I lost my screen. There we go. Now I can see myself. Give me 1 second. I'm going to fix it for me. You're good. It's working for online, but not in person. If you want to continue for 30 seconds, I'll rearrange these so it gets put there. Okay, sorry about that. We're experiencing a little bit of a technical difficulty. I think they do this to me on purpose just to see how I'll handle it. I don't handle it very well. So departments currently using year-to-date as an allocation basis today, we will reach out and have ask if you still need to remain using year-to-date. There we go again. Sorry about this, guys. Give me 1 second and they'll fix it for me again.
Last time, promise.
Hope so.
No. Strangely, this is why computers will never fully take over.
Okay, let's try this again. So again, if you're currently using year-to-date as your basis, and you need to remain stating year-to-date for your basis, we will either reach out to us or we'll be reaching out to you to see if it's possible that you can switch to a period allocation basis. A year-to-date solution does exist for departments who require to stay year-to-date. Please send an email to fiscal.cmo@fiscal.ca.gov if you feel that you must remain year-to-date. If you think you can switch to period, let us know. We're more than happy to have a discussion with you to help you make that decision. So departments that require running default 0 will need to continue to use year-to-date as an allocation basis, since periodic allocation basis only uses default 1 and picks up and allocates only current month data, where year-to-date, as we know, goes all the way back to pick up that data to the beginning of the fiscal year. Departments can change the allocation basis from year-to-date to period if the basis does not change each month. The example would be statistics, and cost pools are cleared each month. So beginning 2020, departments can return to using a year-to-date allocation basis if that meets your needs better than using period. So this slide shows your changes to allocation processes. Why we wanted to show you this slide is so that when you go into the lower level test environment, obviously you're going to have more allocation steps. So this shows you the 3 groups, the 3 book code groups that will be new to users. One is the pre-book EXP, and another one is your rev book EXP, and your post-book EXP. And we can explain that more in detail when you come for testing. So this talks about the changes that are being made to the department's allocation process due to this new PFA functionality. So your time span will change from year-to-date to period, if that's possible. If it's not, we can discuss it. Default 0 will no longer be used to run the changes on the time span. The new chart field that you'll see that we talked about in the previous slide is book code. Book code is used only to identify the fiscal year. There's no impact. It doesn't have any impact on your transactions. So, and this just lists your additional groups to process. And during testing, we will give you a list of how to run your new steps. So this talks about the allocation processing. So the allocation process will use the PSFS allocation, which is your FSC_ALLC, except for when you run your post-book exception group. For that group, you'll be using a new allocation process, which is your ZZ_ALLC for your PFA, for your allocation run, PFA validation, and your journal editing. And these just show you the screenshots in the lower level test environment of how you would make that selection. So we're at the appendix, and the appendix will talks about your different PFA budget exceptions. So these are errors that you may encounter while you're running the PFA validation. As you can see, most of them speak to failing budget check. So your PFA fail talks about Your multiple PFA source lines rolling up to the same statewide appropriation is allowed. And if the condition's not met, it will fail budget check. Your PFA fail 2 is the sum of all your GL journals must match your PFA source, plus the sum of all your journal lines must match your PFA targets and should be 0. And again, if this is conditions not met, it will fail budget check. So your PFA fail 3, budget journals should be posted in your CC_PFA ledgers for your target lines. And again, if this condition isn't met, it'll fail the transactions, the journal will fail budget check. If this happens in testing, we will have SMEs in the room to walk you through the process to solve these errors. So this talks about after testing is completed and once it goes live in production, any post-go live activities. So during testing, you'll identify if your PFA letter needs to be updated. And of course, that's handled by DOF and SCO. If any of your fiscal configuration needs to be updated in regards to allocations, you'll send a CMR to the FSC. Any ServiceNow incidents that are regarding an update to your PFA letter, that's of course done by the department and then sent to DOF and SCO for processing. If it's in regard to a PFA validation tool, you'll open a ticket, which will then be assigned to fiscal SCO to look at. Any allocation configurations, you can open a ticket and fiscal will process that request. Allocation statistics and labor distribution are of course handled by the department. And I believe that concludes the end of this session. If you have any questions, please ask them, and I'll wait for that.
Hi, Kathy. This is Brianna Lee from CMO, and we have one question online. This person is asking, is the test environment a copy of production environment? Currently, there's a system error at our department LD process, and we cannot run LD at all. Would that be a problem?
So that's a good question. It should not be a problem. The data in the lower level test environment is captured from production as of October 15th. We will have labor SMEs in the room. So if your department is having trouble running your LD process, one, I would encourage you to open a ticket, which I'm sure you've already done. But another is we'll have a labor SME in the room to work with you to resolve that.
Thank you.
You indicated that we needed to contact CMO to figure out which period we would be running.
Send us we don't, unfortunately, we don't have that information available to us right this moment. But if that normally helps the department to know what period they'll be transacting in the lower level test environment. So if you could just send us an email, we can respond to it and let you know what period you'll be using for testing.
And then that's the period we would want to make sure that we had run labor for that period.
Right. And normally you have,
and that would have needed to have been run by October 15th. So if it wasn't, then like say, for example, we're still working on July and we ran labor for July and November, would that mean we need to rerun labor when we come in for testing so that that information is there for period 1? Or even if you wanted a period 2 or 3, how do we make sure we're prepared when we get in?
Right. So anything that, so it's current as of October 15th. So that would be period, let's see, period 4. So sorry, I have to count on my fingers. So a lot of departments are in period 4, but whatever period you're in, so the department would know if it's period 1, oh, we've already done period 1, we've already ran labor. We know what the errors are, we know how to resolve them. So if we were to tell you period 1, then you would bring that information that you use to correct those labor errors. I don't think we're going to ask, if you haven't already done it, we're not going to ask you to do it again. So like period 4, you haven't even done period 4, then we wouldn't ask you to do that. Yeah. More than likely, yeah. Any other questions?
We have a question online. Would the PFA validation fail a transaction that contains reverted appropriation?
So without knowing more detail, my answer is yes, it would fail. But if that's something that I would keep in mind for testing when you come in so you can see how it works. But in my mind, yes, it would fail.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, that concludes the session today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you for being patient with our technical difficulties. And I hope you have a great day for the rest of your Monday. Thank you.